So as the day that I'm filming this, tomorrow is Friday the 13th, and it is also the day that the new How to Train Your Dragon live action remake is released. When the original film came out, it was sort of a gamble for DreamWorks, as the book series it was based on was only like moderately popular, and it was projected that the movie would result in the same sort of moderate success. But instead, it quickly became one of DreamWorks' most popular movies, and it resulted in 2 TV series and 3 sequels. So by this point, the release of the live action adaptation isn't really going to be much of a gamble. And they seem to have taken a page out of like the whole Sonic movie situation. You remember when Sonic was ugly? And they've just made Toothless look exactly the same as he originally looked. I remember when I saw the trailer, I was kind of confused as to why they were even making the movie, because I was like, this is just the animated film, but with Gerard Butler in a Viking helmet. Like I said, Gerard Butler is in the new film, and he was also in the original, and they've got some of the same cast in the new one that was in the original. So they're largely, playing it safe. Considering this is DreamWorks and not Disney, they kind of have, more of a risk involved, but, I think it's probably gonna do pretty well. The sad part is that Jay Baruchel, who voiced Hiccup in the originals, is not a teenager, so he will not be able to fill the role for the new film, which a lot of people are really sad about, because they thought that like his very notably sort of nasally sort of dorky voice was like a really important aspect of Hiccup in the animated films. But instead, Hiccup is going to be played by Mason Thames, who was originally in The Black Phone, and he is, of course, from everyone's favorite Nordic country, Texas. In the trailer, it kind of seemed like Mason was talking with just a little bit of a nasally inflection, but it was just less of an impression of Jay and more of just a little bit of a callback, or just this is how Hiccup sounds. I'm also really happy that they actually cast a teenager to play a teenager, because Mason is 17. Which means he's younger than me. I don't know how to feel about that. So really the only gripes that I've seen surrounding the movie are that it's just not as exciting as the original, both visually and probably story-wise as well. There's also been some backlash around the casting of Nico Parker, who is a biracial woman, as Astrid. And Astrid originally looks like the Never Makes Your Snow girl. So, pretty white, and people are angry because a black woman plays a Viking in the Dragon movie. People are angry that there's a black woman in the Dragon movie. Also, if we're going to talk about the casting, I have to point out it's really good. The guy who plays Roughnut, his face is the same shape, his hair is the same color, everything. I think they got the people who did Mindhunter to do the casting for this film. It's really impressive. Anyways, the reason that I mention this new film is it's part of what is a huge influx of all these live action remakes. And so I kind of just wanted to do a video talking about why I think that's happening and why we're all in hell. Yay! One of the first reasons that I've listed is money, which is an obvious one because that has always been Disney's goal, is to earn as much money as possible, no matter what it costs, even human life. I don't know why. I think that live action remakes and reboots are a natural part of every film production cycle. I mean, if you look at Nosferatu, the original one came out in the 1920s, and then the remake with Isabelle Adjani came out in 1970 something, and then the remake of that came out this 2024, this past year. So it's natural for people to look back and say, oh, that was successful, why don't we do it again because it's my turn. But I really think that live action remakes of animated kids films has been amped up insanely in the past decade or so, and I think this is mostly due to the fact that obviously there's a lot of large-scale corporate acquisition, especially on Disney's part. They pretty much own everything at this point. And isn't that just so exciting? And then of course, money. It's a revenue-focused production cycle. It's always been that way. Nothing surprising. I think that Disney realized that they really had something with this whole live-action reproduction thing with Cinderella. Cinderella came out in 2015. It had a budget of $95 million, and it made 500. That's more than 5 times the amount of money it took to make it. So they're doing pretty well for themselves. Disney has been making these LARs since like 1995, which is when they released 101 Dalmatians. But of course, the mid-2010s was really where they struck gold. Again, Cinderella. They also had Beauty and the Beast in 2017, which it generated more revenue than Grenada's GDP of the same year. Like, not by much, just 1 million, but like, oh my god, that's a whole country. What, I sounded like SS Sniper Wolf. That's a whole country. You get the point. It's a lot of money. The second reason that there's a lot of these live action remakes of these movies that came out in the 90s is because it's really easy nostalgia bait. Disney, they became a media giant really easily in the 90s, and they are reliant on nostalgia from their primary demographic, which is millennials, surprising no one, because anytime you see a video of a Disney adult, it's a millennial.
I don't see how you can hate from outside the club. You can't even get in. Leg out. Yellow model cheese. Yellow bounce.
And this is mostly due to the fact that like millennials are born between 1981 and 1996, meaning that they were in the prime demographic for the release of movies like The Little Mermaid, Pocahontas, Beauty and the Beast, Lion King, Mulan, Hercules, Tarzan. There's a ton. And I think that was also the year that like Disney World and Disneyland like really started to become like these big, you know, exciting attractions. Needless to say, it was a really big part of these millennials' childhoods. So if they get the chance to either relive it by taking their kids to see the remakes or just going by themselves, you know, that's not something we should really, you know, say is it's a bad thing actually, because I hate millennials and I hate everything that they do and they ruin everything. The third reason is that they're kind of just running out of ideas. And I don't mean that there aren't ideas out there. I mean that there aren't ideas that would appeal to a small to mid-sized production company like Disney would have been earlier in their history. For the level that Disney and some of the other production companies like Pixar and DreamWorks are on, you can't really take a chance with these small little new ideas. You do have to go for stuff that's big and familiar to the people. And a lot of the familiar fairy tales, like say Snow White or Sleeping Beauty, have already been done. Sorry, my phone ran out of storage and it stopped the video, but essentially what I was saying is like these international stories that were also really popular in Western environments have also largely been gone through. They either have to rely on remaking these movies about stories that they've already told, or they have to rely on new stories that are being created like Encanto and Frozen and Moana. Of course, Frozen and Moana both have roots in, you know, older folklore and older fairy tales, but for the most part, they're largely original stories in certain ways. Additionally, the classic 2D animation that was, you know, really thought of as like the magic of Disney is largely lost to time. The lightning in the bottle that Disney had all those years ago just kind of doesn't exist anymore. And it's true that like 3D animation has vastly improved over the past few years, and you know, one of their most popular films is in 3D animation. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. It's called Frozen. But it, you know, it's not always worth the time and the money and the effort to create this new 3D animated movie if a production company isn't sure that anybody's going to come and see it? We can see this with movies like Wish. Wish was released in 2023, right in the middle of Disney's current pixie dust fueled live action movie binge, and that was a box office bomb. It sucked. The animation looked bad. The music and script were so bad that people thought it was AI. And all in all, it seemed like a low risk, low reward movie. It kind of seemed like Disney was just sort of going like, eh. And then they were like, oh, it didn't go very far. Oh no. Anyways, live action Tarzan. Even high quality animated films like Encanto, which was released in 2021, still had a relatively small profit in the box office. People still loved it. They watched it on Disney Plus, and of course this was still during COVID, so not many people going to theaters anyways, but I think that sort of marked the beginning of the end for Disney when it came to relying on these types of movies, you know, the good ones. So yeah, truth is animated movies just aren't as popular as they used to be, and of course this isn't entirely like our fault as the audience. We have to eat what's on our plate, and if Big Daddy Disney says live action's what's for dinner, we aren't really gonna say no. You know, we eat what we can. So, because we have no choice, because they fill literally every single slot in our movie theaters, the question is, are live action remakes a bad thing, necessarily? People who say that they are criticize these production companies for being lazy and making these sometimes poor quality live action remakes as nostalgia bait and cash grabs, because it's like, oh, you remember this movie you loved from your childhood? Well, we took it, we repackaged it, and now we're spitting it back out into your face. Aren't you just so excited? Why don't you come see our movie? Don't you just love it so much? Come and see it. Additionally, people criticize this for diminishing the platform for new creators to contribute original stories. Like I said earlier, Disney is now huge, so it's not really going to want to take the chance on a new tiny story. They're going to want to rely on something that's familiar, that's already been done billions and billions and billions of times. These live action remakes are also seen as unnecessary, and like one of my points was earlier, a sign that production companies are running out of ideas of what to do. It's also a way for these big companies to try out mostly racial diversity with familiar stories. You know, maybe they don't want to create a whole new film, which, you know, already has chances of not doing well, and then on top of that, put in diverse characters, because then, unfortunately, there's going to be people who are like, ooh, a black person in my Disney movie? No.
Your cat is like, oh, no.
No, thank you. Unfortunately, people are going to be like that instead of putting diversity in a story which may already flop just because it's a new story, even though that's literally what the people have been asking for ages now. Disney may decide, well, you know, here's this familiar favorite that everybody loves, so if we put a diverse person in there, maybe they'll be less mad at us because they love the movie already, because it's their favorite. Eat it. And people on the other side who say that live action remakes aren't really that bad, they say that, you know, this is a way for these newer generations to interact with these classics that we loved so much, and it's all about us. So if we like it, you must like it too. And there is the fair point that, like, this is a way for a more diverse range of children to be able to see characters with those same diversities on the big screen. For example, what happened after The Little Mermaid came out. You know, people liked it. It was generally very good feedback because, I mean, Chloe Bailey she's fantastic. And then, of course, you got these TikToks of, you know, little kids being like, look, mommy, she looks like me and she's on the big screen and she's so pretty, you know, and how can you hate that? How can you hate a little child experiencing joy and fun? Seriously. but will also say, well, you know, these adaptations, these reboots, they've always been a part of the film production cycle, and alongside them, we still have original animated films being produced, like Turning Red and Encanto, and I believe there's one coming out sometime soon, Elio, which, as far as I'm aware, isn't based off of anything that Disney has already done. So I think I've personally made my opinion clear about the fact that I think that these live action remakes are kind of a lazy way for Disney to ensure success. It's less about actually telling stories and more about what's going to give us the moolah. So if you're like me and you think that these remakes suck, how do you stop them? Produce new stories, especially for children. How to Train Your Dragon, like I said earlier, was inspired by a YA series. It wasn't inspired by an old fairy tale. So there is still the chance for newer stories that you want told to be told. But here's the unfortunate part. I'm gonna hold your hand when I say this. In order to do that, you have to tell them. I know, I'm sorry. But yeah, produce new stories. Have this new stuff, put it out there in the ether, because who knows, maybe it'll get picked up. And if not, you know, it's still a good thing you're doing. Don't watch them if you think that they suck. You know, everyone thought that the Minecraft movie was going to suck, and it did suck. And you know what? People watched it anyway because they just can't help themselves. Because chicken jockey, we had to see the chicken jockey, we had to see chicken jockey, we had to see it on the big screen, we had to see that little chicken jockey on the big screen, we just had to do it.
Chicken jockey!
Additionally, you can support smaller production studios that still use this traditional or this like exciting, fantastical animation style, as opposed to these cash grab giants. For example, Leica Studios, Cartoon Saloon, Triggerfish, Aardman, Studio Ghibli, TMS, the list goes on and on. You can do your own research. And the last thing to understand is that us, the consumer, as long as we are there to support it, there will always be creators who are genuinely excited to produce an original story with this stunning animation and this wide-ranging diversity. The instant example that comes to mind is Coraline, which, you know, had a lot of diversity, and it was a really fascinating and alluring tale. And like, if you watch any of like the behind the scenes or like the making of videos, you can tell that the people who are making it genuinely have so much love for it, because it's, you know, secret stop motion is really hard to do, so you really gotta like it. Kids movies, they're nice, they're fine, but you know, watching an animated movie with stunning visuals really was, in my childhood, and I'm sure your childhood as well, it was really like the most magical aspect of a movie. Some of my favorites included Treasure Planet, Song of the Sea, Epic, Fantastic Mr. Fox, that one was a really big part of my childhood. Isle of Dogs, Atlantis, Over the Garden Wall, Rango, the animated Spider-Man films, Into the Spider-Verse and Across the Spider-Verse, and of course those are still being made. The Prince of Egypt and Puss in Boots: The Last Wish. Some of these are from recent years. They represent hope. They represent the fact that like good movies are still getting made, maybe not as often as they used to, and maybe not with the same, you know, amount of attention that they used to have, but you know, they're still out there for you to find. And then of course some of these are from the past, and they represent examples of like the way movies used to be and like how good they were, but you know, oh. Light, dark, sorry. But you know, they represent a relic of hope. The fact that like, you know, just because this thing existed in the past doesn't mean we can't bring it back to the now. Revivals happen all the time. And I really have faith that a revival can happen, and that these genuinely good quality movies can be made again, and children will be cared about again. It might take a giant class overthrow against our overlord Disney, but you know, what's done is done. tomorrow's also my birthday. But I didn't mention that because I didn't think anyone would care. I'm a pretty girl. I'm gonna be with a birthday girl tomorrow. I'm gonna be the birthday girl. It's gonna be my birthday. And the movie gonna come on my birthday. When I was a little baby, Nacho Libre came out. Nacho Libre.